Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I would like to invite Dr. Hamza Tota to continue with the presentation focusing on green manufacturing investments. Please join us.
Thank you. Thank you for attending this master class late in the afternoon. So we will begin the class with the definition of what is green manufacturing. How does that differ from traditional manufacturing, right? So in traditional manufacturing, we take, we make, then we dispose. That worked well for maybe 100 years, but not anymore. So we got to do something different. The difference is we still take, but we like to take less of it, maybe make more of it, and rather than dispose, we want to reuse, recycle, or maybe with advanced manufacturing technologies like 3D printing, what they call transmigrate. Take the material that is used to make a machine A and take the spent material, the polymer, and use it to make office chairs. So now you have created an entirely new value chain. So green manufacturing essentially is a common sense approach. Good for business, good for community, and good for the environment. Why did we not do that? Because we just did not focus on it. Now there is a need. So in this lecture, I will propose a new way to measure the value. That value being measured not just economic, that is financial gains, but also look at the gains we have in the social value or social dimension and environment or ecological value, and use some of the assessment tools to convert those values into financial terms. And once we have that focus, then our product design and development people, be the engineers, scientists, and technologists, can use those principles from the design itself. So this requires a shift and a mindset change. And so this idea of using balanced value creation, in this case in a manufactured product, and that balanced value will be financial gain, social value gain, and ecological gain, and look at it throughout the entire ecosystem. Then I believe we'll be moving into the 22nd century results in the 21st century. That is an idea. So with that, I will now walk through some slides. And like we said, late in the day, so I may not go into in-depth discussions, but I will be available later on for having conversations with you, since we are few of us. So you can call me and we can engage in substantial conversations into the depth. Any questions about the definition? Self-explanatory, right? I tried to make it these self-explanatory. What we'll do, we'll look at 5 use cases from 5 different industries. And so I call them the ecosystems. And see how each one of these companies have adopted sustainability practices into their business. Some of them used sustainability business model as a differentiator from competition. Some of them used sustainability as a core value that drives the company culture. Some of them use sustainable strategies to guide KPIs, key performance indicators. for manufacturing operations, including the supply chain. Does it make sense? It's very logical. We just need to think differently. Paradigm shift. So let's quickly look at these 5 companies. The advanced composite structures. This is a services company. It provides services, right? Repair services to fixed wing aircraft as well as rotary wing aircraft. That means jets as well as helicopters. And they deployed lean manufacturing practices into their business operations. So before we looked at lean manufacturing practices as a separate entity that used to drive manufacturing efficiencies, right? Drive out the cost. Now this company is using the lean principles deployed into manufacturing process and get them lean principles guide the design and development also. See how that changes the mindset of their design and development people, scientists and engineers. So they are looking at the overall system costs. And this is an example of a company that is economically viable and environmentally responsible. Remember, these are some of the early adopters of these practices, using the lean practices to drive sustainability efforts. Is it clear? Okay. That differentiation. Then let's look at the next one, Herman Miller. This is a leading furniture supplier in the United States. And it so happens this company received the prestigious award, Outstanding Corporate Innovator Award from Product Development and Management Association. And it so happened the year they won the award, I was on the board of directors, so I got to have in-depth look at this company's innovation system. Now I continue to serve on the committee that actually evaluates companies and help them improve their innovation process. So with that, let me share some of their strategies they deployed. Once they've been recognized as outstanding innovator, the next step. So Herman Miller is an example of the next step. Once you win the Outstanding Corporate Innovator Award, you do not stop there. Innovation is a journey. So this is an example of a company, how it is evolving its practices. Okay? And so they adopted a triple bottom line business strategy. You all heard of triple bottom line, right? It is well known, but they adopted the strategy as part of their sustainability efforts. And to make it simple, we can think of this as 3 P's, right? The profit, the people, and the planet. And they institutionalized the sustainability practice, I call it to bake it in, through a defined vision. They called it perfect vision. And this initiative was leading the company towards zero landfill, zero hazardous waste generation, zero water emissions, zero air emissions for manufacturing, and 100% green energy for power. They had a separate group that focused on environment, health, and safety. And they began to draft a series of evolving design for environment guidelines, which their product development teams, the design engineers, incorporated into their manufactured products. Next, we look at a carpet manufacturer. Oops. Deso is a carpet manufacturer. And they have taken a different approach because they are dealing with some hazardous chemicals. And so their strength has become their innovation. And so they embraced circular economy and using their technological innovations to be a member company in a circular economy. What does that mean? Circular approach to product development and consumption, right? They're looking at, remember we told you, life cycle? So they're looking not only at production, but also consumption, these carpets. And they use this mindset now, the new mindset, take, make, use, reuse, recycle into their decisions. This is called, when I make a recommendation for a success factor, I say bake in. This is baking in into the company culture, operationalizing the strategy into action plans, and then they are measured. And this company has been recognized for its achievements. And they also began to focus on qualifying for cradle to cradle certification. This is an outside group to validate their efforts. And this validation is done by outside company, but they're looking at this, how these companies' patents or inventions or innovations are incorporating environment as well as social sustainability. Okay? So as they think of this, your company has IP, patents, and you have your innovations, and so this company is looking at how you are using those innovations to create value, not only to make money and profit, but also in the social dimension and ecological dimension. And they're measuring it, outside group. And they have a criteria. In this case, they have 5 categories for sustainability: material health, material reutilization. That means if it's a waste, you find a way to put it back in the process. Renewable energy and carbon management, so reduce your carbon footprint. Water stewardship, especially in carpet manufacturing, hazardous chemicals, very critical. And social fairness. And this is another example of a company that has really living in its culture around sustainability. Okay? So we have excellent examples. Next, Ford Motor Company, right? It is an auto manufacturer. And Ford had a vision of sustainability in manufacturing. And that vision is actually manifested in the birth of the Dearborn, Michigan truck plant, which was inaugurated on May 2004. Okay? So way back then, before we all talking about sustainability, but they had a vision. This is significant because when I talk to the CEOs and founders, I talk to them. The limitation is not your people, the limitation is your own thinking, my friend. And we do that over a scotch. So the vision. So that vision has been translated into this factory. And this factory has built 2.6 million trucks in 10 years. Okay? And this factory has been recognized as a gold standard or established world-class standards for efficiency and environmentally friendly manufacturing processes. Can you imagine traditional auto manufacturers, incumbent players in the market, adopting this creative and innovative, taking fair amount of risk? That's why vision is very critical in the hands of the senior executives. Let's look at their goals. They have set measurable goals: 2030, 2035, 2050. Let us start with 2050. They want to become carbon neutral by 2050. Why 25 years? It takes that long. So it's a realistic goal. 2035, they want to locally sourced renewable energy for all manufacturing plants globally by 2035. It is doable in about 10 years. So when you make these bold goals as part of your organization's vision, your workforce should believe in them, right? You can stretch goals, but they should be doable. So this is another example. I will have some conversation with CEOs. BOHAG, right? Bold and ambitious goals. Yes, you need to be bold, but must be operationally feasible. Another good example, as a best management practice. Now let us look at competitive advantage. And in case of Ford, because of its leadership, its brand and brand recognition and brand equity became its competitive advantage, especially with Ford F-150 trucks, EV, You probably heard of that story. And in case of F-150, they literally shed 15% of the body weight of the vehicle, or 700 pounds they took off from that weight of the F-150 truck. There are many naysayers. I knew some engineers who worked on that. I knew those engineers were solid because I used to meet them through PDMA, Product Development Management Association. They were solid. And so they convinced their bosses this is a risk. It is acceptable within our corporate parameters, risk tolerance parameters. Then return on investment. Using these sustainability initiatives and taking risks, they have actually done what they set to do. That is, gain or make positive returns on sustainability investments. Okay? And they did that through efficiency and lower operational costs. By the way, the AI presentation, I'm very optimistic that in the future, companies like Ford Motor Company will be focused on leveraging these new capabilities to enhance productivity. So that's a good way to further build on what I'm talking about. So Ford is another motor company, which is another example of economically viable and environmentally responsible manufacturer. So when we look at those owners and executives saying that sustainability is not for us, market is not ready for us, you may not want to accept that at face value. The next, Patagonia. You heard of Patagonia, right? Leader in outdoor. And they also invested in sustainable practices. However, they're different. They went about it different way because their ecosystem, their value chain is different. So they have incorporated recycled materials in their apparel. Again, risk. They are willing to take the risk. And they have emphasized continually environmental responsibility throughout their supply chain or value chain. I keep on repeating these words because these are the nuts and bolts of your operation. And these objectives and goals, we need to bake them in, so functionally they are baked in into your day-to-day activities. Okay. And so it has proven that a sustainable business model, in their case, can be profitable. Patagonia. So those of you working with business models, this is a good example. And there is something called a benefit corporation. Okay. If you have time, I could have told some stories about these corporations. When we first started the corporation as an entity, if you go back and look, they were designed to supplement what the government cannot do to do good to the society and the community, and then sell them products, goods and services. We lost that. So this benefit corporation or a certification as a B Corps will take us back to the good old days of the founding of a corporation, at least in the United States, as a legal entity. So I was very happy to see that, getting back to our roots as a corporation. And to become certified as a B company, a business must meet social and environmental responsibility standards with the goal of creating value for the broader society than just traditional returns to shareholders. Make sense? So what I'm sharing with you today is really not new. Some of these companies have been doing their own thing. In case of this B corporation, if you go back and look at the justification for the existence of a private corporation, you'll see that in the annals of history in the United States. Do some good while making money. Okay. And in this case, just to close the story, the certification standards include, for example, impact assessment, both in social dimension, ecological dimension, and in the annual revenues of $5 billion. So if you're a SME, you will not qualify. Matey, we need to grow our companies to $5 billion so we can get B certification. All right, the next slide. So now I would like to summarize, take home, these 4 success factors. If you are dealing with a traditional manufacturer, they do not know how to get started or where to get started. So these 4 success factors will help you in the journey. We have discussed each one of these as I was going through these 5 use cases. Do you have any questions about what I have here? I tried to explain about baking in, core value, the 3 Ps. So when it comes to making investments in green manufacturing, there is a proven pathway, clearly identified success factors. So the risk mitigation, risk strategies are manageable, but you got to work hard to make it happen. Next, we look at return on investment. We have been singing the same story here, right? Basically, this has to measure value in both financial terms, do some social good, social value, and do less of a damage to ecology or environment, or create positive value. So we have seen in these 5 use cases, they all went about differently, in a different way. They were all successful. That fit their business model. But in all cases, they are trying to realize the full value out of their value chain. Make sense? The Ford, all these 5 companies. As they pursue the value chain, they are trying to derive the full value. However, after this masterclass, you know, those 5 use cases, they have left something on the table. Almost all of them only had 2 of those dimensions fully realized. Because in their existing business model, they have not baked in the value creation matrix into their goals. So I propose a new model. Nothing new, except we do things differently in terms of how we set our goals, how we define sustainability returns on investment. Methodologies are established, however, it requires a lot of hard work. So we'll go through that real quick. One of the things you see when you read the press, there's a lot of confusion about investments in green manufacturing. Some negative stories, and investors shying away from investments. So I say we need to learn to tell a better story to ourselves and to investors. And using the value creation approach, we'll be able to share our story to investors, to our own executives, the CEOs, the CFOs, the board, to invest in these practices, and to regulators. So we can help them write standards that make sense for the ecosystem. And within the ecosystem, then you can now compare, improve, benchmark, so the entire ecosystem itself elevates. Make sense? Ideas are very simple. We just need to make them happen. But starts with thinking differently. So for communication purposes, this social, thinking differently about social return on investments, and baking these social returns into our environmental and financial returns will make our capacity to fully realize the value from our value chain or supply chain. I tried to make that argument, as clearly as I could within the short time. Now we look real quick through some methodologies and tools and the metrics. And you all can look up on some of these. None of them are new. I had them all. I'm willing to go through the in-depth discussion, but because of the time, we'll limit the conversation. And like I said, you can always contact me for one-on-one dialogue, should you choose to. So these are some of them. Okay. Nothing new, right? Life cycle assessment. Material flow analysis. There is one tool, C-balance, I want to highlight, because that C-balance measurement takes closer to where I'm heading, except they're looking at their individual company, whereas we are looking at ecosystem level to create a methodology or a framework. So various manufacturers, different locations, have the common framework or a benchmark for improvement. So what is C? So S is for social value. E is the eco-efficiency analysis, okay? And so C-balance basically integrates social metrics, that is the social value, with the traditional eco-assessments, offering a holistic view of sustainability that includes ecological, economic, and social dimensions, right? So C-balance, I believe, as a method or a metric for assessment is getting closer to where I'm proposing we go, but elevate to ecosystem level. Next, the data-driven waste reduction matrix and the data analytics, like we're talking about from Siemens, AI is right in there. In fact, in my discussion, I was going towards that because we need those power, and investments, Then the financial metric, okay, so I will skip now. The next one. So let's look at an investor trying to invest money in green manufacturing, be it the outside investor or our board of directors, right? So what are some factors they have to consider? I listed several of these factors. Again, none of them are new, except we need to be thinking along these broad considerations to make informed decisions, right, in investment. Each one of us, we can go through, I'm sure we have had some conversations here today about the policies and the financial incentives, right? For example, policies can be supportive, right? Encourage investments. What we call crowding in, like the United States Infrastructure Act was trying to do. What it means is when the government is putting money in, that investment is encouraging private investors to come in and put more investments. So the private funds, together with the public incentives, will make it a reality. That's the crowding in, okay? On the other hand, for example, EU standards or ESG reporting standards became complex, became a hindrance, right? So they have to, earlier this year, I believe, issue new guidelines or new regulations to de-complex or simplify those reporting standards. I believe close to several billion euros in savings, and they are trying to incentivize investments in in sustainable markets. So the government policies and financial instruments they have in their hand can be either supportive, encourage, or rigid standards can demotivate investment. So they have a significant role to play. Okay. Rest of them are self-explanatory. So we will. Any questions on those? We can discuss any of them if you like. Any others? So now we come to what I am coming to. That is, it is time for new assessment tool or a method. So I have been saying that we need a paradigm shift from efficiency-based assessment to value creation-based methods. Not just at the corporate level, but elevate to ecosystem level. Under ROSI and SORI, we discussed those. Those are the metrics they are using for measuring returns on investment. They are slowly changing the paradigm from tradition to the new one where we want to go. And develop ecosystem-specific balanced value creation. And obviously it requires buy-in from stakeholders and communication with all levels, open communication. That includes not just manufacturers, but suppliers and public and social stakeholders. So this is the new metric I have proposed. Again, the same thing we have been talking about, the triple bottom line established at the ecosystem level, specific to this industry. This is a metric. There is a work needs to be done. If I had more time, I was going to work in your AI and data analytics, which actually you emphasize, so that fits right in here. Work needs to be done. Okay. So some questions and then we will conclude. Who will fund this thing? It is a responsibility at a higher level. Then nobody actually takes the ownership, right? So question, who will actually do the work? And then establishing, the ecosystem-based either goals or standards or guidelines that can be used throughout the ecosystem to raise all manufacturers, elevate them in their performance. So a common framework based on data, buy-in from all stakeholders. It'll take some time and investment, but I believe with the mindset play we have, we can get it done. And with that optimistic view, thank you and appreciate you attending the work session. Good night.